Margaret, you need to stop telling people you're part of this. Vanessa's voice cut through the music. Nearly 200 guests filled Hale and Hearth that night. Champagne glasses caught the glow of the restored brass lights. Servers moved between oak tables carrying Daniel's smoked trout crostini, and the open kitchen smelled of rosemary, butter, and wood smoke. A reporter from the Riverton Ledger had asked how I knew the family. I smiled and said, "I've known the chef all his life." That was when Vanessa crossed the room. Her cream-colored dress was flawless. So was the smile she used for cameras. She touched the reporter's arm. "I'm sorry," she said. "Margaret gets confused in crowded places." The reporter looked from her to me. Vanessa lowered her voice, but not enough. "She's been getting senile lately. Sometimes she doesn't know where she belongs." A woman beside me stopped lifting her wine glass. One of the servers looked down. The reporter's expression changed. My hand tightened around the handle of Thomas's old leather briefcase. Then I looked at my son. Daniel stood near the open kitchen in his white chef's coat. His name stitched over his heart. He had heard every word. I could tell by the way his shoulders stiffened. "Daniel." He looked at me, then he looked away. Vanessa turned toward a security guard near the entrance. "Please escort her outside. She's upsetting the guests." The guard was a broad man with a gray beard. He took one step toward me, then stopped. "Mr. Hale?" Daniel's face had gone pale. I waited for him. There are moments when hesitation is understandable. Then there are moments when it becomes a decision. Daniel swallowed. "Please do what my wife asked." The guard approached carefully. "Mom, perhaps we can step outside for a moment." Before I could answer, Richard Cole set down his champagne glass. He had spent the evening speaking with local business owners and members of First Meridian Bank's lending team. He wore a dark suit, a silver tie, and the same controlled expression I remembered from years of credit committee meetings. He stepped forward. "I'm afraid we have a problem." Vanessa's smile returned. "Richard, I'm sure it can wait until after the photographs." "It cannot." The guard paused beside me. Richard looked at Daniel and Vanessa. "First Meridian cannot proceed unless the property owner has executed the landlord consent." Vanessa gave a small laugh. "Of course. Daniel can sign whatever you need." Richard walked past him. The room was not silent. Silverware still touched plates. Music continued near the bar, but the sound around us thinned. Richard stopped in front of me. His eyes moved briefly to Thomas's briefcase, then back to my face. "Mrs. Hale, we need your signature." Vanessa froze. I looked at my son, and this time he looked back. 6 months earlier, he had come to my house carrying a pot of his father's stew. The stew was too salty. Daniel knew it. I knew it. Neither of us said anything. He had used Thomas's handwritten recipe, the one with a grease stain over the word time and a note in the margin. "Let it sit. Good things don't like to be rushed." The three of us sat at my dining table on a cold February evening, while rain tapped against the windows. Vanessa had arranged presentation boards beside her chair before touching her food. Daniel set Thomas's recipe notebook near my plate. I found this in one of the boxes from the garage. I ran my thumb along the cracked brown cover. Thomas had spent 40 years building other people's homes. For nearly as long, he talked about opening a family restaurant. He never measured ingredients properly. A cup meant whatever mug happened to be clean. Daniel watched me turn the pages. "I want to open Hale and Hearth." He leaned forward. "Not just another restaurant. A place built around the food Dad loved. Seasonal menu. Open kitchen. Local suppliers. A room that feels permanent." Thomas had been gone 4 years, but that word still reached places I kept under control. "This could be the one that works," Daniel said. His last restaurant project had failed before it properly opened. He had joined 2 investors in a farm-to-table concept outside New Haven and trusted numbers he never checked. By the time he understood the lease, labor model, and construction budget did not fit, the damage was done. I had paid the final vendor dispute. "What's different this time?" I asked. He looked toward Vanessa. She opened the first presentation board. "Hale and Hearth isn't being positioned as a chef vanity project," she said. "It's a family hospitality brand with a clear market identity." She had done the work. The board showed a charcoal and copper logo, sample menus, staff uniforms, launch phases, and a projection of the dining room. Another page covered media strategy, private events, partnerships with local farms, and a 6-month opening schedule. "We're not selling nostalgia," she said. "We're selling trust, warmth, and consistency. Thomas gives the story authenticity, but Daniel's food has to carry the business." "That's a useful distinction. I thought you'd appreciate it." Daniel pushed his bowl aside. We found a building. Where? 214 Morrow Street. I knew the property. 3 stories of old brick near the river district, arched windows, a service alley, and enough space upstairs for private events. The lease will be expensive. Vanessa slid a summary toward me. The broker believes we can secure a 15-year lease. Has the owner agreed? Not yet, Daniel said, but they want a serious long-term tenant. I studied the projected rent and construction allowance. What are you asking from me? He exhaled. We're short on the final build-out. How short? The number sat between us. Is this an investment or a loan? A loan, he said quickly. Documented interest, repayment schedule. I closed Thomas's notebook. If I help, there will be conditions. Daniel nodded. First, the restaurant operates through a separate company. No mixing personal accounts with business money. Vanessa picked up a pen. Hale and Hearth Hospitality LLC. We already reserved the name. Second, you use independent accounting, not a friend, not someone who reports only to one of you. Agreed, Daniel said. Third, my house will not be pledged, guaranteed, cross-collateralized, or mentioned in any financing package. Vanessa's pen stopped for a moment, then she wrote it down. Understood. Fourth, major expenditures must be reported. I don't need to approve every spoon, but I will not learn about large commitments after they're made. What counts as major? She asked. We'll define it in writing. She nodded. If I do this, I told Daniel, I am not rescuing you from another bad plan. I know. No, you know the words. I need you to understand the difference. Rain pressed harder against the windows. He looked at his father's notebook. I want the chance to do it right. I believed him. That did not mean he knew how. All right, I said. Bring me the documents. Relief crossed his face. Vanessa reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, Margaret. An hour later, they put on their coats and stepped into the hallway. I carried the bowls into the kitchen. The front door had not fully closed. I heard Vanessa ask him quietly, how much does your mother actually control? 3 days later, I drove to 214 Morrow Street before sunrise. The building had once been a neighborhood bank. Its limestone nameplate had been chiseled blank, though the outline of the old letters remained above the entrance. 2 arched windows faced the street. A brass night deposit slot still sat beside the door. I stood on the sidewalk with coffee cooling in my hand and remembered Thomas bringing me there, nearly 30 years earlier. He had been repairing the roof after a winter storm. I stopped by with sandwiches, and he led me up a narrow service staircase to show me the original timber framing. People cover good bones because they don't know what they're looking at, he had said, tapping one of the beams. But good bones wait. I could almost smell the tar on his jacket. The broker arrived at 7. Inside, the old banking floor was wider than it looked from the street. The teller counters were gone, but pale rectangles remained on the tile. The ceiling rose nearly 20 feet. A corridor led to old offices, a freight entrance, and a reinforced vault that could become a wine room. The broker talked about historic character. I watched the things Thomas would have watched. The cracks above the rear windows were old and stable. The basement was damp but not rotten. The electrical system needed replacement. The roof had perhaps 5 good years left, not 10. A commercial exhaust system would require structural reinforcement, and the loading area needed drainage work. I had spent most of my career evaluating commercial loans. Thomas had taught me how buildings lied. Fresh paint could hide water damage. A clean lobby could distract from a weak foundation. A low purchase price could become expensive. The moment someone opened a wall, the numbers still worked. The asking price reflected the condition. The surrounding blocks were improving without being overvalued. The upper floors could eventually support private dining or events. Most important, Daniel's restaurant could survive there without a market-rate lease choking it during the first year. I ordered inspections and reviewed the property records, liens, environmental reports, tax history, and utilities. There were no hidden encumbrances, only deferred maintenance and a seller who valued certainty over a bidding war. I formed Morrow Street Holdings LLC and made myself its sole member. My attorney read the purchase agreement twice, then looked over her glasses. Does Daniel know? No. He believes an outside landlord is buying the building. He knows an LLC is negotiating the purchase and lease. That is technically true. It is enough for now. She closed the file. Why not tell him? Because he wants one achievement that doesn't feel like something his mother handed him. If he knows I bought the property, Every compliment will sound borrowed. You're still making the project possible. I'm giving it room to survive. I'm not giving him success. And later? If the restaurant becomes profitable, and Daniel learns to manage it responsibly, I intend to transfer part of the ownership to him. You haven't put that promise in writing. He has work to do before it becomes a promise. Later that month, I signed the purchase documents with Thomas's fountain pen. The black barrel was worn, and the clip was slightly bent from years in his shirt pocket. Ink stained my middle finger as Morrow Street Holdings LLC became the owner of 214 Morrow Street. 2 weeks later, Hale and Hearth Hospitality LLC signed a 15-year lease at a rate below what a renovated restaurant property in that district could have commanded. The lease included insurance requirements, maintenance obligations, and restrictions against pledging or materially encumbering the leasehold without the landlord's written consent. Daniel reviewed it with his attorney. He asked me once whether I knew anything about Morrow Street Holdings. Only that the terms appear unusually patient. He smiled. For once, maybe we got lucky. I watched him sign for the tenant, then I signed for the landlord with Thomas's pen. The $300,000 build-out loan was documented separately. The note required monthly reporting, access to supporting records, and written notice of major spending. One day, I thought, this will belong to Daniel. Construction began with noise. For weeks, every conversation inside 214 Morrow Street competed with drills, saws, and debris crashing into dumpsters. The old banking floor disappeared beneath plastic sheeting. Walls came down. New ductwork crossed the ceiling. The vault became a climate-controlled wine room. Vanessa moved through the chaos as if she had been born wearing a hard hat. She remembered subcontractors' names, brought coffee on cold mornings, and sent progress photographs before anyone else thought to take them. When a local lifestyle editor visited, Vanessa guided her around exposed brick and unfinished banquettes, with the confidence of someone unveiling a completed room. This is what Daniel and I have built from nothing, she said. At first, I did not object. Restaurants need stories. She understood that better than Daniel did. She knew which details made editors listen and which belonged in financial reports. Her version was clean. Daniel, the gifted chef recovering from disappointment. Vanessa, the strategic partner who believed in him. A husband and wife risking everything to create something of their own. There was truth in it, even if it was not the whole truth. I never needed my name in a press release. During my banking years, some of the best decisions were the ones no customer knew I had made. So when she held a branding meeting without inviting me, I assumed it concerned menus and media. When a project photograph showed her, Daniel, and the general contractor beneath the Hale and Hearth sign, I told myself I had not been there that afternoon. Then my email disappeared from the weekly construction update. After that, it disappeared from lender preparation calls and revised budget lists. Thomas remained visible, but only in selected pieces. His recipe notebook appeared in photographs beside thyme and an antique spoon. One of his sayings was tested on cocktail napkins. Vanessa proposed naming a private dining room after him, provided his life could be reduced to 3 sentences for the website. She was not mocking him. She was editing him into a brand asset. One afternoon, I reviewed a revised interior budget at a folding table near the future bar. The custom lighting allowance had increased by 40%. The contingency reserve had been cut by more than half. You're reducing the only part of the budget designed for surprises. The lighting is central to the visual identity, Vanessa said. So is opening with enough cash to pay people. We have financing. You have projected financing. Construction problems arrive before lenders do. Daniel came in from the kitchen carrying tasting spoons. What did I walk into? I'm suggesting the decorative lighting be delayed until after opening. Vanessa set down her tablet. This is hospitality, Margaret, not one of your old bank files. The electrician nearby began studying a coil of wire. Daniel tasted a sauce and laughed lightly. Mom sees a contingency line and starts hearing alarms. I hear alarms when someone removes the batteries. He smiled as though I had made a joke. Vanessa has the room under control. Let her make it beautiful. The conversation moved on. A week later, a box of promotional folders arrived. The cover showed the two of them beneath the restored brass lights. Inside was the story of Hale and Hearth, their risk, their vision, and Thomas's dream, polished into a warm paragraph beneath a photograph of his recipe notebook. I read it twice. My name was nowhere, not as a lender, Not as an advisor, not even as Thomas's wife. I had not simply been left out. I had been removed. I left my umbrella at the construction site on a Tuesday afternoon. It was navy blue, with a wooden handle Thomas had repaired twice because he disliked throwing away anything that still worked. The next morning, I found it beside the temporary reception desk. Vanessa was standing with 3 new servers and the assistant floor manager. "There it is," she said when she saw me. "We were wondering when you'd remember." One of the servers smiled politely. "I left an umbrella." She handed it to me. "You've been forgetting things a lot lately." Her voice was light, almost affectionate. "I don't believe I have." She smiled at the staff. "Margaret doesn't always notice when she repeats herself." No one responded. Then she returned to the training schedule, leaving the remark behind as if it were too ordinary to discuss. A forgotten umbrella meant nothing. People misplaced keys, glasses, phones, and entire conversations every day. But similar moments followed. A week later, Vanessa called at 10:15 in the morning. "Are you coming?" "The contractor meeting. I don't have one on my calendar. We sent it last Thursday." I checked my inbox, the shared schedule, and the project thread. Nothing. I wasn't included. "Margaret, we discussed this." "When?" "At the site, near the bar." I remember conversation of the plumbing inspection. "Not a meeting scheduled for today," she exhaled. "All right. Don't worry about it. Daniel and I will handle it." At the next site visit, Daniel mentioned that I had missed an important budget discussion. I was not invited. He looked toward his wife. "She says you were." "She is mistaken." Vanessa tilted her head. "Maybe we should stop relying on verbal conversations." "I agree. Send everything in writing." That would probably be best. Some invitations arrived after that, others did not. When I questioned an omission, she said the schedule had changed or that Daniel had been expected to tell me. At a menu tasting, Daniel served braised beef based on his father's stew. I told a young cook how Thomas used to add mustard at the end and pretend it had been Daniel's idea. Vanessa laughed. "She tells that story all the time now." "I've heard it once," Daniel said. She touched his arm. "Since Thomas died, she repeats certain memories. It comforts her." The young cook gave me the careful look people reserve for the recently bereaved or the very old. I tasted the sauce. It needs salt. Later that month, I arrived alone to review updated insurance requirements. A hostess trainee named Lily met me at the door. "Mrs. Hale, does Daniel know you're here?" "I expect he knows I visit the property." "Did someone bring you?" "I drove." She hesitated. "Do you need someone to take you home afterward?" There was no mockery in her voice, only concern. "No, thank you." "Why do you ask?" Her cheeks colored. "Vanessa said we should make sure you're not here by yourself. She said if you came in alone, we should call Daniel." "I see. I'm sorry." I thought maybe there was a medical reason. That was when I understood she had been discussing my mental condition with employees when I was not present. I thanked Lily and went upstairs. I did not confront anyone that day. I wrote the date, time, and exact language in my black notebook. Near the end of the afternoon, I walked down the back staircase toward the temporary offices. Vanessa's voice carried through the thin wall. "I'm not saying we shut her out completely," she told Daniel. "But we may need to protect the business from her confusion." The first monthly expense report arrived 4 days late. It came as a spreadsheet with broad categories and very little detail. Construction, marketing, travel client development, brand partnerships. The totals were not catastrophic. That was not what concerned me. Problems rarely introduce themselves with one dramatic number. They hide behind descriptions that sound reasonable until someone asks what they mean. A coastal resort charge was listed as an investor retreat. High-end clothing appeared under launch wardrobe. 2 New York dinners were marked media development. A private car service had been billed 3 times in 1 week. There was also a deposit to an event company that did not match anything on the launch calendar. I printed the report and spread it across my dining table. In banking, I learned to pay attention to what people called things. A vacation could become strategic travel. A dinner could become investor relations. A personal preference could become a brand necessity. The label was not proof. It was a reason to ask for documents. I met Daniel and Vanessa at the restaurant the next morning. Workers were installing the banquettes and the room smelled of glue, sawdust, and coffee. "I need clarification on several expenses." Vanessa remained standing. "Which ones?" "The coastal trip, the clothing purchases, the New York dinners, the car service, and this event deposit." She glanced down. "Those are brand expenses. What investors attended the retreat? We met with potential partners. Names? I would have to check. What was the business purpose of the New York dinners? Relationship development. With whom? Her expression tightened, though her voice stayed measured. You can't build a premium hospitality brand from a construction trailer. We have to be visible in the right places. I didn't say otherwise. The clothing was for photography and meetings. The car service was necessary because we had appointments across the city. The event deposit reserves a launch-related venue. Which venue? We're still finalizing it. Daniel came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. What's going on? Your mother is questioning the marketing expenses. I am asking for supporting records. He looked over the report. You're looking at this like a banker. Vanessa understands image. I'm looking at it like someone who lent the business $300,000. And we appreciate that. Appreciation was not an answer. Every decision can't be reduced to a receipt and a direct return, Vanessa said. Every business expense should still have a receipt. There are receipts. Then send them. Daniel gave me the tired expression of a man caught between two people he wished would stop talking. Mom, we're weeks from opening. Can we not turn every dinner into a federal investigation? I asked for invoices, contracts, and a written explanation of business purpose. No one is hiding anything. I did not say anyone was. Send the documents by Friday. Vanessa nodded. Fine. Friday passed. On Monday, she sent photographs of 3 receipts, 1 hotel summary, and a 1-page explanation describing all travel as brand development. The event deposit was missing, so were the names of any investors. I sent a list of the remaining documents. She said the files were with the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper said she had the originals. Then Vanessa said the event company had not issued a formal contract. Each delay was plausible on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. I did not accuse her of theft or fraud. I did not have enough evidence. I recorded each amount in my black notebook, along with the date requested and the answer received. 2 weeks later, an envelope from the resort arrived at my house. My address was still listed as the billing address on an early company account, and the hotel had mailed a duplicate invoice after a disputed minibar charge. The document described the stay as an investor retreat. Total, $8,900. I checked the dates. The retreat began on Daniel and Vanessa's wedding anniversary. There were no investor names on the invoice. Only 2 guests, Daniel Hale, Vanessa Hale. I asked my son to meet me before the construction crew arrived. At 7 in the morning, the unfinished kitchen was cold enough that our breath showed near the back door. Stainless steel tables stood wrapped in plastic. Blue tape marked the future positions of ovens, sinks, and refrigeration units. Daniel was testing the ignition on the new range. You said it was important. I placed the resort invoice on the nearest table. He looked at the total first, then the dates. What is this? You tell me. He picked it up. It was a working trip. Which investors attended? He did not answer. I placed copies of the other expense records beside it: the clothing, the New York dinners, the car service, the event deposit. I asked Vanessa for documentation. What she provided was incomplete. She handles the branding budget. You signed 2 of these approvals. I sign a lot of things. That wasn't my question. He sat on a stool. I may not have read every line. How many did you sign without reading? I don't know. That is not an acceptable answer from someone running a business. His jaw tightened. I'm running the kitchen. I'm hiring cooks, rewriting the menu, dealing with suppliers, and trying to open in less than a month. And your wife is spending company money. She's building the brand. Some of these expenses may be legitimate, but an $8,900 investor retreat with no investors listed deserves an explanation. It was our anniversary. I noticed. She arranged meetings around the trip. With whom? I don't know. He folded the invoice, then opened it again. She said there were people we needed to meet, and you signed the expense. I trusted her. That is not financial oversight. He stood and walked toward the pass. I had watched him avoid conflict since he was a boy. When 2 friends argued, he changed the game. When a teacher questioned missing work, he joked. When business partners failed him, he called it bad timing. He had always mistaken delay for peace. I need you to ask her for the complete records. Not now. The business is using money I lent under written conditions. I know the conditions, then enforce them. He turned. Vanessa is under enormous pressure. So are you. It's different for her. The press wants interviews. The investors want updates. Every vendor calls her. She's coordinating the opening, the guest list, the photographers, and the entire public side of this place. Pressure does not remove accountability. She is the reason people are paying attention. Is that what this is about? Attention? The investors like her. The media likes her. She knows how to make people believe in what we're doing. And asking questions about expenses threatens that. A family fight 3 weeks before opening threatens everything. There doesn't have to be a fight. You know Vanessa. Yes. You know how she reacts when someone questions her competence. I am questioning records, not her worth. She won't hear the difference, so your answer is to say nothing. My answer is to get through the opening, and afterward? We'll straighten it out. When? After we're operating. After the press settles down. After we have real revenue. There would always be another after. I looked through the service window toward the dining room. Workers were installing the restored brass lights. Daniel, do you believe I am losing my mind? His face changed. Mom, answer me. No, do you believe I forget meetings that were never scheduled? No, do you believe employees need to call you when I arrive alone? He looked at the floor. I didn't know she told them that. You know now. She worries about you. No, she is teaching other people to doubt me. That's not fair. Which part? He had no answer. When she says I repeat myself or implies I cannot remember conversations. Do you believe her? No. I don't think you're confused. Then why have you allowed it? He rubbed both hands over his face. Because sometimes you get overwhelmed. The word was soft enough to avoid an accusation and vague enough to support one. What does that mean? You've been through a lot since Dad died. You take on too much. You come into the restaurant, and when something isn't handled the way you would handle it, you focus on it. That is not a cognitive condition. I didn't say it was. But you let her suggest it is. I'm trying to keep the peace. At whose expense? For a moment he looked ashamed, then the shame turned into frustration. This restaurant is the first thing I've done in years that people respect. I don't want every decision to come back to what you think, what you financed, or what you would have done differently. I asked for receipts. It never stays that small with you. What are you asking me to do? Wait, while she spends without records and tells your staff I cannot be trusted alone, until after the opening. He looked at the papers but did not touch them. For once, Mom, can you just let this be our success? 11 days later, Vanessa submitted an application to First Meridian Bank for $1,250. She did not send me a copy. I learned about it when Richard Cole called my home office. Have you received a request from the tenant at 214 Morrow Street? What kind of request? Landlord consent for additional financing. How much? $1,250,000. The proposed use included refinancing existing obligations, increasing working capital, and placing a deposit on a second location. Hale and Hearth had not served its first paying dinner. Has the loan been approved? It is under consideration. Nothing has been disbursed. What collateral are they offering? Business assets, leasehold interests, and certain operating guarantees. Because the structure affects rights under the lease, the bank requires consent from the property owner. Morrow Street Holdings. Yes. Did Daniel sign the application? He signed portions of it. And Vanessa? She is the primary contact. Send the documents through counsel. I will. Vanessa treated the remaining loan steps as administrative. Richard's counsel later sent my attorney a summary limited to statements affecting landlord consent. She had arrived at the bank with a polished presentation, updated projections, press coverage, and a plan to announce the financing at the grand opening. The second location deposit is time-sensitive, she told the lending team. We have an opportunity to secure a favorable site before the market catches up. Richard asked why they should commit to a second location before the first had established operating results. She answered with market growth, brand momentum, and early private event interest. She was persuasive. That was one of her strengths. She could make ambition sound inevitable. Then Richard explained that the financing could not close without the landlord's consent and the signature of the authorized owner. Daniel can sign that, she said. The landlord must sign it. Daniel effectively owns the property through the family. Richard did not argue. He simply said, we will contact the legal owner. 2 days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my house. Inside were the proposed loan documents, the landlord consent agreement, a copy of the 15-year lease, and projections for a second location. I read every page. The refinancing would reorganize vendor debt and short-term obligations. The working capital request was larger than Daniel had ever discussed with me. The proposed second location deposit would tie up cash before Hale and Hearth had proved it could operate profitably for a single quarter. That did not automatically make the loan unsound. Expansion financing can work when the numbers are verified and management is disciplined. This application had neither. I did not refuse consent. I marked several pages with yellow tabs and wrote questions in the margins. Then I requested the full underwriting package, updated financial statements, listed obligations, and support for the proposed use of funds. The final page was a letter from First Meridian. The bank planned to acknowledge the financing during the grand opening program, but only after all approvals and signatures were completed. Richard and I were expected to meet privately after Daniel's remarks, and before any announcement, the last sentence was printed in bold. Your presence at the closing announcement will be required. Richard met me in a private conference room on the 6th floor of First Meridian. The room had changed since I worked there. The oak table was new, and framed photographs of Riverton had replaced the market charts. The air still carried the same faint mixture of coffee, carpet cleaner, and controlled anxiety. He closed the door and placed the loan file between us. No funds have been disbursed. Has anything been approved? The credit committee issued a conditional approval. It depends on final verification, executed guarantees, landlord consent, and other closing requirements. So there is no obligation from the property owner. Correct. I opened Thomas's briefcase and removed my marked copy. Has anyone altered a lease, signature page, ownership certificate, or authorization? No. The formal documents identify Morrow Street Holdings LLC as the owner. No one has forged your signature or submitted a false operating agreement. That distinction mattered. Misleading statements were not the same as forged documents. Careless confidence was not automatically fraud. What concerns you? The way ownership has been described. She told the bank Daniel effectively owns the property through the family. She made similar statements to other members of the lending team. Did Daniel correct her? Not in the records I reviewed. Richard folded his hands. She appears to be presenting the property as an asset the operating company can access through family control. Legally, that is not accurate. Has the bank relied on that statement? Not yet. That is why we verify. Can I refuse to sign? Yes. Without placing Morrow Street Holdings in default? Yes. The lease does not require the landlord to approve this financing. And if I refuse, the loan will not close in its current form. He was not advising me to stop it, he was stating the consequence. Do you believe the application is unsound? I believe it is aggressive for a restaurant that has not opened. That is not the same thing. No. Could it become sound with stronger controls? Possibly. Verified use of proceeds. Limits on expansion spending. Independent financial reporting. The same protections I had requested from the beginning. Is there a family problem I should know about? He asked. There is a business problem. That wasn't my question. It is the answer I can give. We had known each other for 23 years. He understood when silence was a boundary. I have concerns about the operating records and how information is being presented. I'm not ready to decide whether those concerns justify refusing consent. What do you need? Facts. Margaret. I will not damage a restaurant because two people handled money poorly. There are employees attached to this now. Cooks, servers, dishwashers, bartenders, hosts, and managers were depending on Hale and Hearth for income. Vendors had scheduled deliveries. Families had accepted jobs based on the expectation that those doors would open. I need to protect the restaurant and the staff before I decide. Richard's voice sharpened slightly. If they are misrepresenting ownership, this may be more than a family disagreement. I understand. Then don't wait too long. That afternoon, I called Helen Brooks. She was a certified public accountant known for independent reviews of closely held businesses. She had no connection to Daniel, Vanessa, First Meridian, or the restaurant's outside bookkeeper. I told her I needed an examination of business expenses, supporting documents, approval procedures, and the proposed loan disclosures. Are you asking for a fraud investigation? She said. No. What are you asking me to determine? Whether the records support the expense classifications, and whether the financial information provided to the bank is complete. That I can do. I'll arrange access under the reporting and inspection rights in my loan agreement. Will management cooperate? I don't know. Then put every request in writing. I already have. That will help. I wrote her name in my black notebook. Helen Marie Brooks. Independent review. No conclusions before documents. The grand opening invitation arrived by mail. It was addressed to Mrs. Margaret Hale in the same formal script used for donors, reporters, and members of the Riverton Business Association. Beneath the restaurant logo were the words, "Founded by Daniel and Vanessa Hale." Thomas appeared near the bottom in smaller print. Inspired by a family love of food and the memory of Thomas Hale. 40 years of marriage reduced to one line beneath the parking instructions. I placed the invitation beside his recipe notebook. The final rehearsal took place 4 days before opening. The dining room was nearly complete. Glassware caught the restored brass light. Place cards marked seats for investors, journalists, city officials, and members of the bank's commercial team. My name was at a table near the side wall, not at Daniel's table, not with the family. The center table included Daniel, Vanessa's, Richard, 2 local investors, the mayor, and a magazine editor from Hartford. My seat was between a retired insurance broker and the president of a garden club. Vanessa approached with a headset around her neck. We had to adjust the seating, I see that. The family table became more of a sponsor table. Am I no longer family? Please don't make this difficult. You'll be more comfortable at table 12. It's quieter. I did not ask for quiet. You don't do well when too many people are speaking at once. She delivered the sentence softly, but several people were close enough to hear. What do you need from me that night? I asked. Enjoy yourself. Talk to people. Let Daniel have his moment. Was I scheduled to do something else? No. Then why are we having this conversation? There will be reporters there. I need to know you won't discuss the loan, the construction budget, or any private financial arrangements. I have never disclosed confidential business information to the press. I'm not accusing you. You are giving me restrictions no one else received. I'm asking you to be careful with details. She lowered her voice. And please don't make an unscheduled speech about Thomas. I was not planning a speech. I know memories can come up unexpectedly. Memories do not force me onto stages. I'm trying to avoid confusion. She walked away during the rehearsal. Daniel thanked the design team, the kitchen staff, the farms, Vanessa's branding partners, and the people who believed in their vision. He mentioned his father once. He did not mention me. Near the entrance, 2 security employees reviewed the event plan with the coordinator. One of them held a sheet containing several small photographs. I recognized mine. The coordinator noticed me looking and turned the page over. As the rehearsal ended, Lily approached while I was putting on my coat. I thought you should see this. She showed me a photograph on her phone. My picture appeared beneath the event schedule. Beside it were instructions to notify Vanessa if I approached the stage, bank representatives, or members of the press without an escort. At the bottom, beneath a line about avoiding confrontation, were 2 words, cognitive concerns. Hongriger Helen arrived at my house shortly after noon on opening day with a gray folder under her arm. She placed it in the center of my dining table. This is preliminary. I'm waiting for 2 vendor confirmations, but the classifications are clear enough to discuss. She removed a summary sheet. The total amount of expenses that do not appear to have served a direct business purpose is $48,620. I wrote the number in my notebook, 48,620. The largest categories include the coastal resort stay, luxury clothing, New York dining, private transportation, and the event company deposit. She placed a schedule in front of me. The coastal trip included the $8,900 lodging invoice, spa services, meals, and transportation. Clothing had been purchased from high-end retailers but never appeared in a photo shoot, event inventory, or documented meeting. The New York dinners had no attendee lists. Private car invoices did not match the business calendar. And the event deposit? The company is legitimate, but the event was never scheduled for Hale and Hearth. What was it for? A private anniversary reception. For Daniel and Vanessa, the proposal lists their names. Were all $48,620 paid from restaurant accounts? Either paid directly or reimbursed through Hale and Hearth Hospitality LLC. Were they approved? Some by Vanessa alone. Some by Daniel. Several lacked the second-level review required by the company's written procedures. He admitted signing without reading. That matches the records. She pulled out a printed email chain. There is another issue. The messages were between Vanessa and the outside bookkeeper. The bookkeeper had asked whether monthly reports should continue going to me. Vanessa replied, "Margaret is no longer actively involved in the business. Please route financial questions through me or Daniel." A later message said, "She has been struggling with memory since Thomas died. Additional reports tend to confuse her and create unnecessary concern." Helen watched me read it. She used that explanation more than once. When the bookkeeper asked why your document requests were unanswered, Vanessa said you were repeating questions that had already been resolved. They had not been resolved. I found no record showing they were. Another email concerned the First Meridian loan. "We need to keep the process moving before the property side begins another extended review. The owner is passive, and the landlord consent should be administrative." Did she know who the owner was? I asked. I found no evidence that she did, so she wasn't hiding the applications specifically from me, not knowingly. But she wanted it pushed through before the owner reviewed it. That is how the email reads. Helen sat back. "These records show improper classifications, weak controls, incomplete disclosures, and misleading statements about your involvement. Do they show a crime? I am not making that conclusion. Can the expenses be repaid and corrected? Yes. Can the financial statements be amended? Yes. Can the loan disclosures be revised? Before closing, yes. The restaurant could still be protected. That mattered. Does Daniel appear to have known about the comments concerning my memory? Some of them. He was copied on 2 messages saying you were no longer involved because financial details overwhelmed you. He had known, not everything. Enough. You can stop the loan, Helen said. I know. You can also demand repayment and new controls without closing the restaurant. I know that too. Then what are you uncertain about? For years, I had confused protecting Daniel with helping him. Whenever he made a poor decision, I stepped between him and the full consequence. I called it support because the alternative sounded harsh. Thomas once told me, "A building is only valuable when the people inside it protect one another." Protection was not the same as concealment. I carried his leather briefcase to the table and opened the brass clasp. First, I placed inside the certificate confirming I was the sole member of Morrow Street Holdings LLC, then the 15-year lease. Finally, Helen's report with the $48.620 total visible on the first page. Thomas's fountain pen rested in the narrow leather loop. Helen watched me close the case. "Are you going there to save the restaurant? Or to save your son?" I placed my hand on the worn leather. "Tonight, I may have to choose." By 6:30, Hale and Hearth glowed from every window. The old bank had become something beautiful. Rettered brass lights cast warm circles across the oak tables. The former teller wall had been opened into an archway leading toward the bar. Candlelight reflected in the glass doors of the old vault, now lined with wine bottles. Small pots of thyme stood along the kitchen pass. Thomas always grew too much thyme. Near the entrance, a framed page from his recipe notebook hung beneath the restaurant logo. Let it sit. Good things don't like to be rushed. For a moment, pride pushed everything else aside. Daniel had created food worthy of the room. The staff moved with purpose. Plates left the kitchen bright, balanced, and carefully arranged. Thomas would have loved it. Vanessa stood near the center of the dining room in a cream-colored dress. She wore a discreet headset, greeted donors by name, guided photographers toward the best angles, and corrected small problems before guests noticed them. She was excellent at this. When a server dropped a tray near the bar, the glass was cleared, and the guests redirected before the quartet finished its song. When the mayor arrived early, she adjusted the receiving line without checking a schedule. My assigned place was table 12, near the rear wall. Thomas's briefcase rested beside my chair. From there I could see Daniel near the kitchen, Vanessa near the stage, and Richard speaking with members of the First Meridian team. He acknowledged me with a slight nod. We were scheduled to meet privately after Daniel's remarks, before any announcement about the financing. At 7:15, Vanessa stepped onto the small platform near the bar. 6 months ago, Daniel and I stood inside this building when it was cold, dark, and empty. A photograph appeared behind her. The two of them wore construction helmets beneath exposed beams. People told us the timing was wrong. They told us the risk was too high. They told us a restaurant this ambitious should wait. She smiled toward her husband. But sometimes you have to bet everything on the life you want to build. Applause moved through the room. She thanked the design team, contractors, farmers press, and early supporters who had helped. Two people with a vision turn an abandoned bank into a home. The story was polished, it was also incomplete. Daniel joined her in his chef's coat. My father loved food, he said. Not fancy's food, honest food. A few people laughed when he described Thomas measuring flour with an old coffee cup and refusing to follow his own recipes. He believed a table could repair things that words couldn't. He paused. This restaurant carries his name, his recipes, and the kind of welcome he gave everyone who came through our door. He thanked Vanessa for believing in him after the last project failed. He thanked the kitchen team and the guests. He did not mention me. I had never required public gratitude, but he had chosen a version of the truth that made my absence useful. Dinner service began. The food was exceptional. Roasted squash with brown butter, trout with crisp skin, beef glazed with the mustard Thomas used to add at the last minute. During the second course, a woman with a press badge approached. Margaret Hale? Yes. I'm Claire Dawson with the Riverton Ledger. She shook my hand. I covered commercial lending when you were at the regional bank. You were involved in the riverfront redevelopment loans, weren't you? Some of them. I thought I recognized you. She glanced toward the stage. The family connection makes sense now. Daniel is my son. She took a small recorder from her bag but did not turn it on. I'm writing about how Hale and Hearth secured this location. Morrow Street properties have been difficult to finance. That's true. I was told the building arrangement came through family support. Before I could answer, Vanessa appeared beside us. Claire, I hope you're enjoying dinner. Very much. I was asking Mrs. Hale about the property. Vanessa placed one hand on the back of my chair. There isn't much of a story there. We negotiated a long-term lease and built the business from the ground up. Claire looked at me. I heard Margaret may have helped with the real estate side. The hand on my chair tightened. Claire lifted the recorder. Is it true Mrs. Hale helped secure this property? Vanessa answered first. Margaret was supportive in the early stages, but she is no longer involved in the project. I looked up at her. That isn't accurate. Claire shifted the recorder toward me. Vanessa's smile held for another second. What Margaret means is that she offered advice when we were getting started. I mean that I remain financially and legally involved. Across the dining room, Daniel had begun watching us. Richard stood near the stage with the lending team. Several guests at neighboring tables turned in their chairs. Vanessa glanced toward the photographer near the bar. The story was moving out of her control. She stepped closer to Claire. Please forgive her. She's senile and sometimes confuses old memories with what is happening now. No one gasped. A server paused with a bottle over a guest's glass. The violinist looked toward us between measures. Someone at the next table whispered. Claire lowered the recorder. Vanessa had finally used the word, not forgetful, not overwhelmed, senile. I looked at Daniel. He stood near the open kitchen with one hand on the pass. Daniel, he did not move. Is that what you believe? His eyes found mine, then moved away. Mom, this isn't the time. It became the time when your wife questioned my mind in front of your guests. You're proving my point, Vanessa said. I kept my attention on my son. Answer me. He came around the bar. You're upset. That isn't an answer. I think you should go home. Do you believe I am senile? Please don't do this here. I did not begin this. Mom, do you believe her? He pressed his lips together. In the unfinished kitchen, when no one else was listening, he had said, I don't think you're confused. Now the room was full. Vanessa turned toward the entrance. Security, the gray-bearded guard approached. Mrs. Hale, perhaps we should step outside. I am seated at my assigned table. She is disrupting the event, Vanessa said. Please escort her out. The guard looked at Daniel. Mr. Hale? For a moment I waited for the son I knew to appear. He knew I was not confused. He knew the meetings had not been sent. He knew the security instructions had no medical basis. Please do what my wife asked. The guard stepped closer. I'm sorry, Mom. His hand touched my forearm. That was the moment I stopped telling myself. My son was trapped between two people he loved. He had made a choice. Stop. Richard's voice came from behind the guard. The guard released me. Richard approached carrying a dark blue First Meridian folder. One of the bank's attorneys several steps behind. Vanessa forced a professional smile. Richard, this is a private family matter. No, at this point it is a banking matter. He stopped between the guard and my chair. The bank cannot proceed with the financing announcement until the required landlord consent is executed. Vanessa gave a quick nod. Of course. Daniel will sign it. Richard looked at him. Mr. Hale operates the restaurant. He does not own this building. Daniel stared at him. What do you mean? Vanessa asked. The property at 214 Morrow Street is owned by Morrow Street Holdings LLC. We know that. It's a family entity. Richard did not respond to the description. The bank has verified the company's ownership and signing authority. He looked at me. Mrs. Hale, may I identify the authorized signer? Yes. Morrow Street Holdings LLC has one member authorized to execute the landlord consent. Margaret Evelyn Hale. No one applauded. A chair scraped against the floor. A man near the bar lowered his wine glass. Claire stood still with the recorder in her hand. Daniel's face emptied. Vanessa looked at me, then at Thomas's briefcase. That's impossible. It is a verified legal fact, Richard said. I lifted the briefcase and carried it to the nearest table. Richard's attorney placed a copy of the company certification beside it. Vanessa followed. She's confused. She may have signed something years ago and misunderstood it. The ownership certificate is current. She has been struggling with memory. That does not alter the filing. I removed the certificate showing I was the sole member of Morrow Street Holdings LLC. Then I placed the 15-year lease beside it. Daniel recognized his signature on the tenant page. Mine appeared on the landlord page. You signed this? He asked. Yes, as the landlord? As the sole authorized member of the landlord. You bought the building? Yes. When? Before the lease was executed. Why didn't you tell me? That question would have to wait. Vanessa looked toward the guests. This has nothing to do with the financing. Daniel is her son. She supports the business. Family relationship is not landlord consent, Richard said. We were told this was administrative. It is a legal requirement. She will sign. I looked at her. You never asked me. We didn't know we had to ask you. You told the bank the property was effectively controlled through the family. Because it is. No, it is owned by Morrow Street Holdings LLC. You own that company for Daniel. I own it. I did not raise my voice. I did not come here to take my son's dream away. I came because you were about to borrow against rights you did not own. We are not borrowing against your building. The proposed financing affects the leasehold, landlord rights, and future control of this property. That is why the bank requires my consent. You're making this more serious than it is. The bank drafted the requirement. Not I. She turned to Daniel. Tell her we plan to explain everything after the announcement. He did not answer. Daniel, he looked at me. Were you ever going to give me the building? I intended to transfer part of the ownership after the restaurant became profitable and after you proved you could manage it responsibly. Vanessa stepped between us. This is exactly what I was worried about. She's mixing old plans with current decisions. I removed Helen's report from the briefcase. This has nothing to do with memory. Richard's attorney handed him another document. This is the current certification from Morrow Street Holdings LLC's counsel, Richard said. It confirms Mrs. Hale's sole membership and signing authority. He turned the page so they could see the seal and filing information. The structure was simple. Hale and Hearth Hospitality LLC operated the restaurant. It leased the building for 15 years. Morrow Street Holdings LLC owned the property. I owned the company. Vanessa looked toward the First Meridian banner. You already approved us. The bank issued a conditional approval. We announced the financing to investors. You announced financing that had not closed. The press is here. That does not change the closing requirements. What happens now? Richard closed the folder. Until Mrs. Hale authorizes this transaction, there is no loan. I placed Helen's report beside the ownership certificate. I'll make this brief. Morrow Street Holdings LLC owns the building. Hale and Hearth Hospitality LLC is the tenant. I lent the operating company $300,000 to finish the interior. I touched the report. The proposed $1,250,000 loan does not have my consent. No funds have been disbursed. An independent review has also identified $48,620 in expenses requiring explanation, correction, or repayment. Vanessa stepped toward me. You hired someone to investigate us? I hired an independent accountant to review company records. You went behind our backs. I requested the documents directly. You delayed them. You cannot stand that Daniel succeeded without you. She looked toward the guests. You bought the building secretly, watched us work for 6 months, and now you're destroying the most important night of his career. No. I protected this building so your mistakes would not destroy his future. Daniel looked at the ownership certificate. Why didn't you tell me? I believed you needed the chance to build something without feeling your mother had purchased the achievement. So you bought the building and let me think I had done this on my own. I bought a property and gave your company a favorable lease. You built the kitchen. You created the menu. Your staff made the restaurant real. You still controlled everything. I controlled the ground. I did not control your work. You could have told me. Yes, he had not expected that answer. Keeping the ownership from you was a mistake. I told myself I was protecting your pride. In truth, I was making another decision for you because I did not trust you to handle the full reality. His expression softened. My mistake does not erase yours. He looked at me. You knew I was not confused. You knew I was not forgetting meetings. You knew employees did not need to watch me. Mom, did you believe her? Or did you simply decide defending me was inconvenient? He glanced toward the guests, then the employees. Finally, he faced me. I never believed you were losing your memory. Vanessa turned. Daniel, he did not look at her. I knew you weren't senile. I knew some of the meetings had never been sent. Then why did you say nothing? Because every time I challenged her, it became a fight. That is marriage sometimes. She was carrying the public side of the restaurant. Investors trusted her. The press wanted her. I thought if I pushed back before the opening, everything would fall apart. So you let her use my mind as the explanation. I thought it would stop after tonight. You heard her call me senile. I panicked. You told security to remove me. He lowered his head. I was afraid to stand against her in front of everyone, so I let you stand alone instead. That was the first fully honest thing he had said all evening. It did not repair anything. But it mattered. Vanessa stepped back. This is absurd. We can discuss family feelings tomorrow. We have 200 guests and a restaurant to launch. The restaurant will open. She stared at me. The staff will finish service tonight and they will have jobs tomorrow. Several employees exchanged glances. But the current arrangement ends now. I opened my notebook. The expansion loan is stopped. There will be no deposit on a second location. Vanessa started to speak. I continued. You will lose authority to approve or reimburse expenses. The company will retain an independent financial manager. Personal expenses will be repaid. Daniel will work with an operating advisor and sign a revised governance agreement. You cannot remove me from my own company. I cannot do it by announcement. These conditions will be documented through an amended operating agreement, a member resolution, and a forbearance agreement tied to my $300,000 loan. I looked at Daniel. If you both sign, I will not declare a default under the reporting and spending covenants, and Morrow Street Holdings will continue the lease. And the kitchen? He asked. You remain responsible for the food. You will also learn to manage more than a menu. Vanessa gave a short, humorless laugh. So you own the building, and now you control our lives. No, you control your choices. I control whether my property and my money support them. And if we refuse? Then you will discover the difference between running a restaurant and owning the ground beneath it. 3 months later, Hale and Hearth was still open. The $1,250,000 loan had been withdrawn. No deposit was made on a second location. The restaurant did not collapse. Cash was tight during the first 6 weeks, but the independent financial manager delayed decorative purchases, renegotiated vendor schedules, and rebuilt the operating reserve. The dining room remained full most weekends. Daniel's food earned strong reviews. Weekday lunch took longer to grow, but private dinners in the old vault room helped stabilize revenue. Vanessa lost authority over payments, reimbursements, and contracts. She began repaying the personal expenses under a written schedule. Some clothing was returned. Part of the anniversary event deposit was recovered. The remaining balance came from her distributions and personal funds. She kept a limited communications role because she was genuinely good at it. Every campaign, media statement, and event budget required approval. She accepted the arrangement rather than leave the company entirely. Daniel met twice a week with an independent restaurant advisor. They reviewed labor costs, food margins, vendor obligations, and cash flow. At first, according to the advisor, he arrived defensive and unprepared. Then he began arriving with questions. I did not transfer any part of Morrow Street Holdings LLC to him. The old plan belonged to the past. Giving someone ownership before he learned accountability would have been another form of rescue. Instead, I used part of the building's rental income to create the Thomas Hale Culinary Fellowship. Each year, it would support one cook from a working-class family who had talent but lacked money for professional training. Fellows would spend 6 months learning kitchen technique, purchasing, cost control, and staff management. Thomas would have liked the cooking. I would make sure they learned the numbers. Daniel corrected the restaurant's public story on the website and in a letter to employees, investors, and local press. The new version named Morrow Street Holdings as the building owner and acknowledged my financial support. It explained that Hale and Hearth grew from Thomas's dream, Daniel's cooking, Vanessa's branding work, and the resources I provided. He did not call the original omission a misunderstanding. He called it dishonest. He apologized to the employees for allowing false statements about my health to affect workplace instructions. He apologized to Lily for placing her in a position where she was expected to monitor a guest under a false pretense. Then he came to my house. He brought no food and no documents. He sat at the same table where he had presented the restaurant 6 months earlier. I'm sorry, I waited. I'm sorry I let Vanessa say those things. I'm sorry I knew they weren't true, and still allowed people to treat you as if they were. His hands were folded in front of him. I wanted the restaurant so badly that I decided anything threatening the opening was the enemy. Even you. That is closer to the truth. I don't expect you to forget it. No, can you forgive me? I looked at Thomas's recipe notebook on the sideboard. I can choose not to live in anger. I can hope you become better than what you did that night. He nodded. But forgiveness is not the same as restoring trust. Trust has to be rebuilt where everyone can see it. His eyes filled, but he did not look away. What do I do? You tell the truth when it costs you something. He took that answer with him. I did not return to Hale and Hearth for several weeks. The restaurant did not need me standing in the dining room to prove I owned it. The financial manager sent reports. The advisor called when a governance question required attention. Helen completed her review and confirmed that the disputed expenses had been corrected or placed under repayment. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I walked back through the front doors. There were no photographers, no quartet. Only the soft sound of silverware being arranged for dinner service. The hostess greeted me by name without asking whether Daniel knew I was there. Near the bar, a new framed display hung on the brick wall. At the center was a photograph of Thomas standing beside an unfinished house, a pencil behind his ear and sawdust on his shirt. Below it were his words, "A building is only valuable when the people inside it protect one another." The text beneath the photograph told the truth. It described Thomas's dream, Daniel's food, the building purchase through Morrow Street Holdings, and the financial foundation I provided. It also credited Vanessa's work in creating the restaurant's identity, without pretending she and Daniel had built everything alone. Daniel stepped out of the kitchen. He did not rush toward me or offer another speech. He simply nodded. "Would you like your usual table? I don't believe I have one. You do now." He led me to a small table near the window, not the family table, not table 12. Just a good table in a quiet corner, with a clear view of the kitchen and Thomas's picture on the wall. I set his leather briefcase beside my chair. The building remained mine. The restaurant remained open. Daniel's future remained his responsibility. Vanessa had once called me a woman who could no longer remember. But she had forgotten that silence is not confusion, kindness is not weakness, and the quiet person in the corner may still own the ground beneath everyone's feet.